And here we are. Welcome, everybody. This is a special BookFest event. We're bringing you this in partnership with our good friends over at Roadmap Authors. And we have Selene here with us, who is going to be moderating this panel. I just wanted to welcome everybody and say thank you so much to Roadmap Authors for bringing us this amazing array of literary agents that are going to help authors define, refine, work on their pitch, and maybe even their query letters a little bit too. Here's the structure, okay? So if you're watching right now, you might be watching on the website. Maybe you're natively on YouTube or on one of our Facebook pages. You can ask questions. We're going to do a short Q&A right around the 11:30-ish a.m. And then at about 11:40-ish a.m., we're going to bring in some people that are going to practice their pitch with the team. And in the meantime, I'm going to bring in Selene, and she is going to introduce to you the panel and talk a little bit with each of them and give you some great advice on how to create a stellar pitch and a stellar query. Selene, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Desiree. I'm very pleased to be here moderating this panel of prestigious agents. We have Elizabeth Lizzie Poteet from the Seymour Agency. We have Ken Sherman from Ken Sherman and Associates. And we have Andy Ross from the Andy Ross Literary Agency. So thank you, everyone, for taking your time to be here. And I'm just going to dive into the questions so we can get to as many as possible. So the first question is the first sentence of the pitch the most important? And what should that first sentence focus on?
Well, I will probably say this a few times, but I think it's important to have a good pitch, not to be over-prepared, and try to be as natural as possible. I sometimes have seen people who have notes on their arm, or they, invade my personal space. That's not a good pitch, because it sends a message to me that you really aren't secure about your project. So I think it's worth, you have to be prepared. You don't want to sound like some guy who's just smoked weed or something like that. But think of it. I would think of it as a kind of conversation, and that you should try to, get your points out. I didn't answer the question.
Well, maybe that's an answer, that it really doesn't matter what you start with, as long as you get it out.
Sentences in writing, I suppose, and in pitching are important. But if they aren't, if you get the wrong first sentence, it isn't gonna destroy your future as a writer.
I will say that a first sentence is important in some ways, because it's your first chance to ground the agent and what you're going to be talking about. I've had pitches where the first sentence, the second sentence, maybe even the third sentence didn't tell me what genre the author was writing in. And that, for me, is the thing that I really need you to start with. I need you to sit down and say, hey, my name is Jane Doe. I have a completed 83,000 word romantic comedy that's 101 Dalmatians meets The Devil Wears Prada, featuring an LGBTQ plus heroine. That's all I need to know in that first sentence, because otherwise, I had one pitch where I thought she was talking about a historical fairy tale when she was actually talking about a contemporary YA. And if you don't know what genre the person's pitching, it's going to take a really long time for you to be interested in it.
I totally agree with that. And I've had that experience too, where for 2 minutes, after 5 minutes, I didn't know, I thought it was a memoir when it was a novel, because they never said it was a novel.
Well, that's a good note. We have to really set up that genre. Ken, do you want to add anything?
I'm having trouble hearing everybody. I'm sorry to say. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah, sure.
Yes. Did you hear the
question?
Sure. Sure. Is the first sentence of the pitch the most important, and what should that sentence focus on? Can't hear me? Oh, you're frozen, Ken? Well, for now, let's just move on, and hopefully he can rejoin us.
Ken, you might want to get out of it and then get back into it.
Maybe sign out. Sorry. What's an example of a pitch that caught your attention immediately, and why?
This is going to sound a little callous, but when I'm doing pitch events, I'm getting a lot of information in a day thrown at me very quickly. There's people coming in, there's people coming out, there are moderators, there's time being called. So the things that connect with me are mostly just, as Andy said, the ease of the person, their confidence in what they're writing. The books that I have acquired through pitch events, always though, the main thing they do is they know the genre that they're talking about and they know who they want to market it to. And that's the biggest thing for me, is having someone who's savvy about what they're writing and where that market is. So if they're coming to me and they're like, I have a novel in verse, it's meant for middle grade, but it's 100,000 words, I don't know what to do with that. And I don't know if they know what to do with that either. So having someone who can sit down and be like, this is a Harlequin romance, or this is a memoir meant for XYZ, those are the people I remember.
Awesome.
Well, this is callous as well. Most nonfiction, what's really important is the platform of the author. So if somebody is making a pitch, it's difficult to do if you're a debut novelist. I mean, you don't really have a platform, but so I have to think about something else. But I remember once I had one of these crazy 3-minute pitch sessions, and the person stood up and she told me she was the most prominent journalist who was a war correspondent in Central America. And I said, shut up and call me up tomorrow. But, you know, with fiction or with memoir, it's a lot more difficult than that. I mean, because it's really more about the how than the what. It's how you do the writing. You know, E.M. Forster said, there's only 2 stories in the world. A stranger comes to town and a man goes on a journey. And there's probably a few more than that, but it isn't really about the plot. I like to quote Duke Ellington, who says, you don't have a thing if you ain't got that swing. And it's hard to do that in a pitch. I don't think you can do it in a pitch. A lot of people kind of structure their pitch around plot points. That tends to be confusing. You know, you can't follow them. So that doesn't quite work either. You have to, you have to get the concept, okay? It's not simple.
I would say, to jump onto that, plot points, I only want to know who your characters are. I want to know what tropes you're dealing with if it's fiction. So if you're talking to me about sci-fi, I want to know that you are aware of the sci-fi trends, the market, the tropes that go on. If you're doing romance, I want to know if this is friends to lovers, or if it's pragnesia, or if it's second chance romance. And then I want to know how it ends, because if you're trying to pitch me a specific genre and it ends in a romance with them breaking up, it's not a romance. If it ends with a fantasy and it doesn't have some kind of conclusion, then you're talking about a series. So instead of getting into all the nitty-gritty details, I kind of just want you to give me, like, this is the primary, like, elevator pitch of it. Here are who the characters are, and then these are the elements that the readers in this genre are going to like.
Wow, that's great information. Thank you. Ken, do you have anything? Did you hear that question? I think he's still having trouble. Are you there, Ken?
Are you on the first and second? Ken, are you on the first?
We were on the second question now. Actually, why don't I go to the third, and maybe hopefully you can hear that.
Sometimes if you only do audio, you get better reception. If you turn off your video, I don't know if that will work.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, at the bottom you can stop the camera. Maybe you can.
We all know that you're very handsome, so you don't have to prove that point.
That's right. And we love your books. Okay, what should we never include in a pitch, and what is the key element of a pitch?
Well, okay, I have an opinion on that. As an agent, one of the things I like least, the worst part of my job is managing my clients' unreasonable expectations. So you don't want to give that kind of indicator as a pitch, like, I'm going to make all of you guys rich, is one. And also when you use comps are okay, but make sure they're appropriate. if you're doing a travel memoir, don't say this is just like Eat, Pray, Love. First of all, we hear that all the time. It's a cliche. Yeah. And second of all, the chances are your book isn't going to sell 10 million copies worldwide. You might also not say this would make a great movie, because every novelist I have ever known believes their book would make a great movie. But, the people in Hollywood like Ken are usually thinking, how much will the costumes cost? And will 16-year-olds go to see it? And so that doesn't really help very much.
Right.
I definitely agree. If you're going to have comps, for me, I am happy to have one that is tonally very similar. So if you're going to use a comp, I prefer it to be like my voice sounds like, as opposed to this is a big book in the genre. And then to prove market, if you're going to have a comp, I prefer to have something that's come out pretty recently and maybe isn't an instant bestseller, so that it shows to me that A, you're well read in the genre, and B, again, as Andy said, your expectations are managed, that it's very hard if your debut to come out and sell 10 million copies and eat your way through Italy. Like, right. Most people aren't going to give you an advance to eat your way through Italy and pray your way through Tahiti. So
that's funny. Ken, did you hear that question? Were you able to get that? I don't think he has us. I'm sorry. I don't think he's hearing us. Well, since we were doing the comp thing, I'm just going to jump into another question out of order. What do you think of comparing the overall tone of a novel with a movie or a TV show as a comp?
I don't have a problem. The key to all of this stuff is to, get the person you're pitching to kind of grok what your book is. So if you say your main character is Yoda-like, that's fine.
Great. Excellent.
Yeah, and if you're pitching in fiction to me, or your fiction, I think, is actually more helpful than nonfiction for comps that are in Hollywood, personally, in my preference. I really do enjoy if you say, hey, this is basically the movie, like 10 Things I Hate About You, but gender swapped with like a little bit of If You Seek Amy added to it. Just that can help me figure out what some of the hooks and the high concepts going to be. But I don't want you just to say, hey, this is 10 Things I Hate About You, but told in like Italy in 2017. That's not exactly going to be as helpful to me in terms of a movie comp. I want to know how you're making something different.
Yeah, that would be a little confusing. Like, what was? Okay. Well, excellent. Well, let me ask you the other half of that question again. Do you have like one thing that's the key element of a pitch?
I guess key element of a pitch is kind of hard to define. Pitches are so personal. I personally don't mind if you're going to read off a piece of paper, as long as you give me the information clearly. I would rather have you read off a piece of paper and be concise than to spend your whole 5 minutes talking about the main character's second cousin once removed, how they had foot surgery on page 55. Like that's where sometimes where I think authors who are more introverted, I'm just like, rein it in, yeah. give me something concise. So I would just say the key element to me for a pitch is having someone who knows their style and is able to express it in the best way they can.
Awesome.
And I, as before, I totally agree with Lizzie. Different pitches are effective for nonfiction. I think I mentioned at the beginning is I want to know whether the character has the platform, the authority to speak about the subject they're writing about, and possibly the media connections to promote it. Those are very important. It's tough though with fiction or memoir. With memoir, I think it's more important. The most difficult memoir I have to sell are just sort of personal family memoirs, literary memoirs, sort of like The Glass Castle. Because these especially, they succeed because of style.
Yes.
They're like a novel, and it's easier to sell a memoir that sort of looks outward, sort of like Well, okay, they have a high concept. That's a Hollywood term, which, blah. But a couple of the memoirs I have, one is it's a memoir of a doctor treating Ebola at the height of the epidemic in Africa. Okay, you know what that book is, or a memoir by a woman who is a successful paparazzi. That's much easier than talking about your family and this and that. So if it does, think about the high concept. I mean, you don't have to have a high concept to be good. What's the high concept of the Liars Club? I don't know. I can't articulate it in one sentence.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Ken, if you do hear us, just jump in. I did that already. Wow, we're doing well here. What turns a good pitch into a great pitch?
For me, a good pitch becomes a great pitch when it's an author I connect with. There are times where I've sat down with an author and maybe they were like, you know what? I have a bunch of projects. Here's the one I'm the most passionate about. These are mostly fiction writers. Non-fiction writers, a bunch of projects tends to be like a red flag for me. And they're like, this is what I'm most passionate about. And if we can have a conversation and we seem to connect, those are the ones where I'm like, I definitely want to read this. I want to read this. And also the ones where the author is clearly savvy, so they know what they're doing. They have connections. They have a background in writing. And if they have a high concept, that is also, for fiction, for me, makes it a great pitch.
Well, I don't know if I can answer that. When I send something to a publisher, usually a novel, all I know is the editor has to fall in love with that. And whenever I ask them what they're looking for, they usually say something like, I'm looking for fresh new voices. Well, I know they're not looking for stale old voices, so that doesn't help me very much.
Right.
And I guess the same would be true. It's ineffable, I mean, fiction is really hard to work in. I love it, but you never really know. You just don't know who's going to buy it or who's going to connect with it. So that would be the same as a great pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting. I always wonder about that when people say, "Oh, we're looking for fresh and compelling voices." Oh, I thought you wanted something really like old and boring. I mean, what? Thank you for clarifying that. And we want something different, and then they say, "This is too." We want what? We don't even know what this is. It's like, what do we want?
When they reject it, they have very specific reasons, like it wasn't fresh enough or it wasn't new enough.
Yeah.
It's fresh and new, but I just didn't like it.
Or it was fresh and new. I just wasn't sure how to position it. We're not sure what the market is for this. And it's like, well, it's fresh, it's new.
Yes, I know. It's so true.
There's only sort of like E.M. Forster's definition of a novel. My definition of a publisher rejection letter is there's only 5 of them.
Yeah.
They're a little sad sometimes. Okay, so we've been doing really well with the questions. Thank you, guys. It's been amazing. Are there any special instructions on pitching for memoir writers?
Yeah. That's a hard one. So as Andy touched on a little bit earlier, memoir is a very hard thing to sell for a debut author in terms of, sometimes I ask questions of people who are pitching memoir, being like, why is this story connected to you and can't be fictionalized? How is it different if you take you out of the equation? Because everyone thinks they have a memoir, and sometimes they have a great story, but I also wonder if that memoir maybe should just be put into fiction. Because if you don't have a platform for your story, sometimes the constraints of your own life can hold you back from actually telling a very more fleshed out and complex story. So for memoir, it's all about, for me, platform. I need that person to either be ready to hustle, to have connections in the industry, or to have something that makes it fresh and unique enough that I can say it's a high concept memoir.
Okay, yes.
Well, I already said the same thing. Great minds think alike. One thing that's important to me, and this isn't about making a pitch, it's about defining your memoirs. A memoir isn't the story of your life. The memoir is a story within your life that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. One of the reasons I get memoirs rejected is because the author or the publisher says, I didn't see a narrative arc. So it has to be that way. And one of the most difficult things about a memoir is trying to figure out what the story really is. It's almost as important what you leave out as what you put in.
Right.
Yeah, it goes back to when you're so close to the subject matter. I find that a lot of the pitches I get for memoir, the drawbacks and like the thing that turn me off is that they're so connected to their own personal story. They can't really see the forest. They just see the trees.
Right.
And so they throw everything in, and it doesn't have that cohesive beginning, middle, end structure. And it doesn't really sometimes tell a story. It just tells a snapshot, and I need it to tell a story.
See, the problem with memoir is that you don't have any perspective. It's the most important story in the world because it's about you, but you don't matter. The only person who matters is the reader. And I've seen over and over again that they think they structure their memoir and they start off with the most important incident of their life. And then, 50 pages later, they come up with something that really is interesting to me, but it's hard for the writer to know that.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, and I don't know if Andy has this problem, but a lot of times when I'm being pitched memoirs, what is a bit of a red flag to me is when the author says, okay, that starts in like 1987 when I was born, and then it jumps to 2007 when I graduated from school, and now it's in 2027, and it's just too much of a time jump. I prefer my memoirs to be a little bit tighter in terms of timeline. I don't really need a story that jumps around through 20 years of your life unless it is really focused and those 20 years are telling something bigger about you.
I remember I once heard Cheryl Strayed speaking after she came out with Wild, which was a great memoir. But somebody asked her how long it took her to write. And she said, it took me 9 months to write and 10 years to figure out how to do it. So, and if you look at her memoir, it really, I didn't want to read it. I thought it was going to be a story of, the grass is green, I climbed the mountain, one of these nature things. And from the first page, I knew that wasn't it. And I think it must have taken her a long time to figure out what the real story is within the story.
Yeah. It's funny when you read Eat, Pray, Love, you're like, oh, I mean, she writes really well, and that becomes really apparent when you try to watch that movie. And it's like, oh, the writing is what was good about this. But okay, say you do come across someone pitches well, and they have a really, really interesting story. You can see they've got a handle on what their memoir is, and they have a reason why they wrote it, other than they think they're wonderful, a universal thing. Are you saying that it's still not good, not feasible because of the platform, unless they have a big platform?
I wouldn't say it's not feasible, but I would say it's a real challenge. And what you have to do is figure out how to get beyond that challenge.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the memoir that came out most recently in my mind recently, Educated, I don't believe she necessarily had a huge platform going into it, but it was a well-crafted story, and it did really have a point of view, which I appreciated. So the platform's not make or break, but at the same time, platform is so important, because when we're going to publishers, they're not just saying, oh, wow, this is a great story. They have their sales team in the background and their marketing team in the background going, okay, but like, we did a memoir 2 years ago featuring XYZ, and we only sold 2,000 copies of that. So how are we going to break this out bigger? How's it going to be worth our advance? And so if you have a platform, you already have a built-in audience, and publishers love a built-in audience.
Yes.
Sometimes, Educated is a good example. Sometimes you can do a single line that will be so exciting that you can get beyond all of the other stuff. And with Educated, she told the story. She was self-educated, and and she said she was in the history class, and they were talking about the Holocaust, and she turned to the person next to her and said, "What's the Holocaust?" And that grabbed everybody's attention. It would have grabbed mine too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So to wrap it up with that, you would say that let them consider, why is it not fiction? Why have they not fictionalized it? And could it be fictionalized? That's what you're saying, right?
I think that there are cases where if you don't really have a strong platform, you have a good theme and a solid hook and a great writing style, you can make it. But I also sometimes think that it almost feels like the epitome of ego to think every story has to be a memoir and about you, when it could also be a story that's fictionalized, and it would be maybe a little bit easier to sell.
Okay, thanks. Let's see where we are on time. We have about 4 minutes before we go into the questions. So why don't we, if we could just touch on a query letter really quickly. Why don't both, if you don't mind, would you each give me like maybe a couple of things, what you think, what hits you the most in a query?
Well, this is the same as a pitch, that the first sentence has to say what the genre is, how many words it is. That should be at the first the first paragraph should just say that. Maybe the title, maybe a very brief concept. The second part should be some sort of description, like a longer description of what your book is. Definitely expressing the concept. Definitely not going over the plot points. You do not want a query letter to be a plot synopsis. I'm not going to follow it. I don't have time. It's important. Lizzie, I don't know how many query letters you get a day. I get about 10 to 20. Yeah. So I don't have that much time.
Right.
Yeah, and I do Query Manager, so it's all on my online profile. So I'm going through it, and if your query letter is longer than your synopsis that I have you copy and paste into there, I think that's a problem. Yeah. I would say for me, I like starting at the very beginning. I need the information. I need to know about you if you've published a book before. I need to know what genre, word count. Make sure you say it's completed, because I get burned all the time if it's a fiction and they come to me and they're like, "Oh, I'm still finishing it." It's like, I don't look at fiction that's not been completed. So I need those stats. And then I like the copy after the second paragraph to be voice driven. I like it to sound like back cover copy or jacket copy. So it has some kind of excitement to it. It mirrors the voice that you're going to use in the book. I want you to introduce the characters and the main theme, but I also want it to sound engaging, as opposed to just like, the main character is Olivia. Olivia likes hot dogs. This hot dog once turned into a man. Now she's in love with this man/hot dog. That's not helpful to me. Those are very short sentences, and I need to actually hear your voice. Yeah. I also would love to know a little bit about you at the very end, just to kind of let me know where you are in your writing journey.
Now, all rules are there to be broken. So if there is something that would grab me by the neck or the heart, put it first. One of my clients wrote this perfectly terrible query letter and broke all the rules. But she said that at the very beginning, she said her previous novel won the International Latino Book Award twice in a row. Wow. So I definitely wanted to see what she had to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've won contests, it's great to lead with you've done XYZ. If you're a USA Today bestseller with some indie work, I want to know about that. So pretty much the first paragraph is to get their attention and let them know what they're going to read. So starting by saying, "Hey, I recently won XYZ, and now also I am pitching you a romantic comedy that is XYZ plus XYZ. It's similar to," and if you wanted to do like a small comp there, I wouldn't say no to it. But I think it just needs to be very condensed and to the point.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we have a question from the audience. Is it important to say the word count right away in a pitch?
It really helps. And it better not be more than 100,000 words these days. This is the age of the internet.
Yeah.
Don't try to be, Tolstoy. But there are exceptions. I mean, really, if it's a novel that's 120,000 words, that's no problem. But I just had a book by a client who came in at 170,000 words, and she said, "Oh, I worked really hard to get it down," and I was just,
wow.
I had a hard time. She finally sold it to a university press. I mean, she scared everybody off, and she only sold it to the university press if she agreed to get it down to 110,000 words.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, word count I think is very important too, because if you're pitching me something and you only have 20,000 words, right off the bat, I know the tone of what our pitch is going to be. And that pitch conversation is me telling you need to finish the book because it's not done yet at 20,000 words. I also think that I work with a lot of genre fiction, and genre fiction has very strict word counts. We don't like things that go under or over. So if you're writing category romance for Harlequin, I need you to be within Harlequin's word count range. If you want to be a single title romance at Avon, I need you to be in that mass market word count range. And it really does affect whether or not I'm even interested in the pitch based on what the word count is for the genre you're pitching me.
Well, fortunately, I usually don't work in genre fiction, so I am more flexible. But really, the tolerance of publishers for, I won't say you can't do something that's more than 100,000 words, but I can tell you, as soon as you get beyond 100,000 words, publishers are going to be counting the words.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that. Story has to be as long as a story has to be. But usually, almost every story that I've had in fiction, you could cut stuff out of it.
Right. Okay. Paige asks, what is the best way to pitch a genre-bending novel?
I don't love genre-bending novel pitches because my pet peeve, I should have mentioned this, is when people sit down at a pitch and say, this is unlike anything you've ever read before, because that's not helpful for me.
Right.
For you to tell me this is unlike anything you've ever read before makes red flags, alarm bells, sirens. It makes me want to flip my table over because it's an industry that's built on sales reps and getting your book onto a physical bookshelf. So when you're saying it's not like anything else ever before, where's that book going to live if you walk into Parnassus or you walk into Books A Million? It has to live somewhere. So if you're pitching a genre-bending book, I need to know where it's going to live as its primary format.
When I get stuff like that, and what I don't like is saying, this book is both a memoir and a prescriptive book on dealing with autism. That tells me that the author can't really decide what she wants to write, and she has two books in her mind that she wants to shoehorn together.
Yes.
So that's a big problem. And of course, Lizzie's right, is you got to know where a bookstore is gonna. I used to own a bookstore, and I always had this problem. We didn't know whether we should put it in psychology or something like that. So we were creating all these subsections, but it really was difficult, and then the book always got lost.
Well, I mean, I do know in this case that it's just a fiction that she. I happen to know who asked the question. Just a couple of. It's like like women's fiction and like fantasy type of thing blended.
Yeah.
It seems to me like these days those things get put in. I was in Barnes and Nobles recently, and they were all like in this one area, all the fiction, other than there was romance separate and crime.
For a pitch, it also matters too, because different houses do different things and different editors can acquire different things. So if you're trying to pitch to Alcove at Crooked Lane, for example, they're only doing women's fiction.
Right.
So when I meet with an author and they're telling me about their genre, I would like to know the primary genre.
Okay.
For example, when you look at Mexican Gothic is genre bending, and everything that author does is genre bending. But at the same time, they figure out what the primary genre is going to be for it. So if it's genre bending, I want to know, okay, this is women's fiction that has magical realism. Women's fiction comes first.
Okay, that's very helpful. I like that. Thank you. Yeah. it's tough, you know? So the main thing, and then with this, I like it.
Yeah, and I'm totally fine with books that blend genre if it's in the fiction space. I love something that turns an idea on its head. But at the same time, I need to know what editors are going to acquire it. And I can't know what editors are going to acquire it unless I can target what genre you're actually going to be put into.
Right.
You know, and these editors are always saying they're looking for something fresh and new, but if it's too fresh and too new, they get skittish about it. So they really have to know. I think it has to be clear what genre it is, or they just get confused.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do have problems. I work a lot with sort of literary fiction. I mean, not James Joyce literary, but you know, literary. And then you know, several of my books have been by literary writers with a literary style, but they've been about 16-year-olds, and I've tried to send them to YA editors, and they say, you know, this just the voice is too old. I think you should send it to literary editors. And they look at it, they see 16-year-old, and they automatically say send it to YA. So it's a
problem. I agree.
Yeah.
I often say that these labels are hurting us. They're hurting the literary writers because you know all humanity can relate to each other. This is ridiculous. You know?
And I think the key there is if you're writing on the cusp of having a protagonist that is maybe 16 or something, I would say it's a coming of age story. If you're going to pitch it to me, it's a literary coming of age story is much more helpful for me than for you to say, well, it's a literary young adult that explores larger themes and it's 102,000 words, and I wouldn't know what to do with that because that doesn't fit what a YA is.
Right. Okay. Thank you. This is really a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot myself.
Sometimes I say the most I'll get into it is say this is a literary novel with an adult voice, but it has crossover YA potential, and that's about as far as I would go.
Yeah, we love the word crossover potential.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Let's see. Do you have any suggestions on where someone would find out the word count guidelines for things? Is there like one source for this?
Just Google it. A lot of the basic information, I think Ingram Spark has a very basic one for people who are going to be indie publishing in the fiction world. That's helpful. I know various literary agencies put it on their website. I think Fine Print maybe has it up on one of their blog posts. If you're writing like YA and you want to know if you're in the right word count, just Google like average word count YA and you'll find the range.
Okay.
But I don't think it should be a formula because there are always exceptions to it. A story has to be as long as a story has to be. But either if the word count is too low, like these days under 50,000 words, just be aware that you're going to have a problem. Well, all that being said, the most important, the greatest book of the 20th century is most people would say The Great Gatsby, which was 47,000 words.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
If I had a book that was 92,000 words, I would say it's the length of 2 Gatsbys.
Very good. I like your style. Okay, let me see. We have like 1 minute. Quickly, are YA series books a turnoff for agents and publishers?
No. However, most books, they're not going to do a multi-book deal. They're going to do the first book, and if it takes off, then they're going to encourage you to do another book. But the first book has to stand alone. And you don't want a cliffhanger ending. You don't want to say, this is the first of a 4-book series. The first book has to stand alone. And what you can say is it's got, multi-book potential.
Yeah.
Leave it at that.
That's I would say with like YA contemporary, mostly we're looking for standalone titles. I can't really think of very many besides To All the Boys I Loved Before, series that are contemporary that are YA contemporaries. However, I can say that it is very common if you're doing a YA fantasy to have a multiple book arc, and it is more common to get a multi-book deal if it is a YA fantasy. So it has to have a closed ending, but I would like you to have the ideas of where you think the future stories can go already in your mind. Just because those YA readerships, if you look at Leigh Bardugo, if you look at like the what is it that just came out, the Grishna series on Netflix, those do come from series of YA fantasies.
Right.
So if you are coming and you're saying it is a YA fantasy, I don't want it to be more than 3 books though.
Okay, thanks. All right, here comes Virginia, our first pitcher.
Okay.
Hi, Virginia.
Hi, Virginia.
How you doing?
Is there a Santa Claus? Remember? Yes, Virginia.
Of course there is.
Anyway, go ahead.
3 of them.
Okay. Anyway, you have
and pitch. Okay, where's the ball? I'm supposed to pitch, right?
Yes, we're gonna. Okay. Here's your ball.
I need a baseball.
Yeah.
Although I've never been really good at sports. Okay, well, I've written. It's 200 pages. I don't know exactly how many words it is, but an editor read it. She says it's finished. She said it was good writing, little touches here and there, but so I've been touching away. It's called Shades of Justice. It's a political thriller. There are with women's issues and women empowerment. I'm a woman, so of course I've included empowerment for women. Anyway, here goes. We'll see. An unusually humble senator who has fought tooth and nail for workers' rights, civil rights, and women's rights loses his seat to a flashy golden boy who wears diamond cufflinks, the descendant of former plantation owners. The new senator's Russian-born wife is a doctor with a distaste for nerve poisons, who meets the older senator in the hospital after he chokes on a piece of beef in his wife's beef stew. They love beef stew. They're homey people. Anyway, and he invites her to come and, have dinner sometime and bring the new senator. He's very down to earth and very open-minded person. Meanwhile, her husband, who likes nerve poisons and is interested in population control, like, getting rid of a lot of the darker complected people in the world. He befriends a biowarfare scientist and he talks him into giving him a vial of untested viruses for further research. Then the scientist takes the new senator, introduces him to one of the underage brothels in Georgetown, where he finds the beautiful Black Khadijah, runaway foster child supporting herself and her younger sister and brother off of her sex worker wages. Things come to a head when the Russian-born wife, the next morning when he comes home and the Russian-born wife throws a pot of boiling borscht at him, he vows to kill her. She takes him seriously, flees in their Mercedes, and he takes off after her, grabbing the underage Khadijah en route. She heads for the older senator's house where she has a dinner invitation. He follows her. She arrives before her husband and tries to hide, but anyway, things with treachery incarnate. The new senator attempts to poison the older senator and his Russian-born wife with the viruses, hoping that they are fatal. But Khadijah intervenes successfully. When the former senator's wife announces she's running for his seat to set things aright, the new senator and other KKK members attempt to run his Russian-born wife and Khadijah off the road in a isolated, woodsy area.
Virginia, I think we're going to have to cut you off here so you can get a little feedback. Okay?
I would say I don't exactly. I don't exactly know what's going on in this book because I think you did too much plot. For me, the main thing I want to know is this is a psychological political thriller that focuses on the tricky subject of eugenics and germ warfare. It follows two senators at war against each other in a battle between good versus evil played out on the political sphere with sex, drugs, and scandal. That, to me, is more condensed what you're doing. When you get into so many detailed plot points, honestly, reality is my mind starts going off. I have a hard time paying attention to what you're saying because it's just like, I don't know these characters and you're just throwing names at me and locations at me. I kind of just want to know like what the core of the story is, not the action in the story.
Well, as usual, I totally agree with Lizzie. One of the things that I'm looking for is what's the narrative arc? Narrative arc is a 3-act structure. It was, some books don't have it. Finnegan's Wake, but they're not looking for Finnegan's Wake. It's a structure. It was first articulated by Aristotle 2,500 years ago. And it basically consists of a kind of pyramid where you have rising action until you get to a climax, then falling action, and then resolution. It works. And I didn't see that, and I couldn't. There was too many trees and not enough forest. I didn't see what that narrative arc is, or the other thing is what's the dramatic question. Very simply, in Star Wars, the dramatic question is, will Luke and his friends defeat the evil empire? That isn't all you need to know about Star Wars, but if I know that, I know a lot.
Yeah, and I would say that in pitches, one thing that I don't know if we would have gotten this because of time constraints, I do want to know the ending. That might be controversial, and a lot of times people don't want to tell it to me. But as Andy said, I want to know the key moments of action in the story that lead to the climax, that lead to the resolution, and I want to know what that resolution is. So I kind of want it pushed all together. I want it like he goes on a journey, he falls into a ravine, he saws off his own arm, he makes it out in the end. Those are kind of the plot point levels I want to know.
Okay, well, it ends with...
No, Virginia, we're not going to be able to do that right now. So sorry, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, Don, you're up.
Hi. Okay, well, I'll do mine as quick as possible and try to condense what I had, because mine might have gone like Virginia's had we not heard some of your feedback ahead of time. So let me go ahead, though. So I'm Don Henry. I live in Denver, Colorado. It's a debut novel. I do have some experience doing screenplays, and I wrote a screenplay that was a finalist in Project Greenlight. So that's my only author's background. Otherwise, I've worked in the financial industry for like 25 years until I retired to write this book with my wife's encouragement. So that's me. The book itself is a planned 7-book series called Hollow's School for the Dead. And its theme is really about seeking the light with your friends, which is kind of just the overall series. But and just for a summary of the series is a hero's journey tale about a 12-year-old boy who attends a school for ghosts where wise beings will prepare him for his very bright destiny, a destiny to save all of existence from the darkening. It's basically like Hogwarts, but it's for ghosts instead of witches. In book 1, Journey to the In-Between, which is 111,000 words, the story begins on a very, very dark night, exactly 1 year after the accident that claimed his mother's life, an accident he still can't remember. But on this night, as Chase is pursued by 3 ghoulish middle schoolers, a mysterious ghostly force comes to his assistance, scaring them away at the town's haunted old sanitarium. He then learns that the spirit is his mom, who has returned to warn him of a darkness coming. But before she finishes her message, a monstrous shadowy entity appears, and she protects her son and tells him to run away. Chase tells his friends all about this, and that night they return to the graveyard so he can show them. But it's a graveyard where they also play their favorite game, hide and go seek. And during their game, before he takes them inside, a dastardly ghost catcher named Darian Slick finds them in the graveyard and takes Chase hostage inside the sanitarium and uses him for bait to lure his mom in, where he captures her spirit and delivers her to the Dark One. Desperate to save his mom, Chase and his friends enlist the help of a psychic medium who tells Chase that in order to save his mom, he must find a place across a misty void under a great light where wise beings await to prepare him. But in order to do so, he must die. So really the first book is about his journey to find his mom and to find the school where they'll help him. The next day, while on the school's annual field trip up Shadow Mountain, the school bus crashes off of a steep cliff, and Chase and the others find themselves floating in a misty world headed towards a brilliant light. And he soon discovers that it's a very different world he's found himself in indeed. But not long after their arrival, dark forces ambush them from below, then drag their bus down to the Dark One's shadowy soul train, awaiting to deliver them to the Dark One. But just before they're loaded, 12 mysterious shiny orbs come rocketing down, and there's a great battle with a little bright assistance from Chase and the Seekers. They all escape the gloomy lows and head back upward to once again search for the lost light. After their short journey, their escorts lead them to the misty vale, to the land of the in-between, where they come to a barren mountaintop rising from a vast foggy sea. There they meet the leader of the orbs, a Native American ghost named Sky Cloud, who in the end reveals the floating haunted castle that serves as Hollow's School for the Dead. So that summarizes book one. Then in the upcoming book, it's going to be more about the school and about his actual rescue mission into the darkness to save his mom, which will also lead him back into the town of Erie, where they have to save the town from a dark invasion.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there so we can get your feedback.
Well, there are a couple of points. Well, first of all, you tried to do a synopsis, and as you have heard, it's not helpful.
Right.
I didn't, and it's even more difficult because you're doing a paranormal book. I mean, there's an alternate world which we don't understand. I mean, if you're doing a book about the Battle of Stalingrad, you don't have to talk about the Battle of Stalingrad. But if you're doing a book where everyone's a ghost and they come upon the mystical mountain and blah blah blah, it gets very, very confusing.
Sure.
And it was difficult to follow. The other thing, I don't think you said what genre it was. Is it YA or?
No, it's middle grade. Same as Harry Potter's, target audience.
Well, that's probably the most important point that you didn't say.
It was on the top of my list, and after I started talking to you, I skipped right over it by accident.
You'll never make that mistake again.
One thing I did enjoy was I thought you had a pretty clear hook. It is a magical school for ghosts. I think it took you a little bit long to get there. That's what you should really be leaning into, which is your concept, magical school for ghosts. I honestly don't know if the other thing that kind of set off a big red flag for me is middle grade readers. 100,000 words is a lot for a middle grade age range. That you're talking about 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds here, who's they're mostly reading like Percy Jackson's, which you look at them, they're pretty thin. I almost wonder if you're not quite writing to your genre, and I think that might be one of the reasons Andy was a little bit off-footed, if you will. This is a big story. Part of me kind of feels like you have a fun concept. I would definitely in the pitch lean into it, but I would also maybe look at what you're writing.
Sure.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Stephen, you're up.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me. So just a little bit about me. I am an attorney. I teach negotiation. I write about negotiation. And then I decided to write a kid's book. And now I have this other book. So I could go right into my pitch if you like. So essentially, in 2019, a momentous occasion occurred. I published the book, The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrantocranchosaurus. This book explained how all human beings evolved from the tiniest yet most dangerous dinosaur on the planet, the Tyrantocranchosaurus. Saurus is the Yiddish word for problems. Do you think you have saurus? Nobody could outdo my saurus. And the Tyrantocranchosaurus kept cranking out its saurus till all the other dinosaurs dropped dead. But anyway, this book explains how all humans entered this world really.
Is this the book you're pitching, or is this the previous?
No, it's the next book.
Pitch the one that you want to pitch.
So anyway, it's in one sense. It explains why all humans enter this world really cranky and stay that way. It's part of our inherited genetic code. Since we're all naturally cranky, I decided to write a book, A Grown-Up Guide to Effective Crankiness, the Crankosaurus Method. This book instructs you that instead of getting rid of what's essential part of our true nature, it teaches you how to be effectively cranky. Think about this for a second. You walked into your home to visit your sweet bubby, and she says, "Seymour, take off your shoes. I just bought a $30 rug at Walmart, and I don't want you to put dirt on my expensive new rug." We don't put dirt on the rug, but we put dirt on each other. This is what is called a common Crankosaurus. A common cold, you might get 2 or 3 a year, but the common Crankosaurus is something you could get 2 or 3 times just in the morning alone. So this book helps you diagnose and treat the common Crankosaurus and even other kinds of Crankosaurus, such as a fly in the ointment Crankosaurus, a can of worms Crankosaurus, the straw that broke the camel's back Crankosaurus, and the most deadly Crankosaurus of them all, the dry meat crazy Crankosaurus. By embracing our crankiness in an effective way, we learn how to make our world a more happier and peaceful place, not only for ourselves, but all the people that are around us.
Well, it's funny. I assume it's a book of humor, not a book of how-to.
It's both, actually. It's actually it's a self-help book, but it's the funniest self-help book you will ever read. I'm an attorney, but I'm a humorist, and I spent 29 years being married. Actually, I'm in my second marriage to therapists. So I've had that piece as well. And also negotiation is like trying to get other people to yes, and how to listen. And, so it's a very funny book. But it really is a self-help book. But it does.
I wouldn't have gotten that from just your voice and your tone. If I still owned my bookstore, it sounds like I would have put it in the humor section, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm Jewish, so your pitch had a lot of Yiddishkeit in it, stuff like that. So I found it very entertaining, but I'm not sure how much non-Jewish people would get it. Maybe they would, but I think saying that it's part self-help, but it's also humor is confusing. I think you should probably decide where in the bookstore that book is going to go.
Stephen, for me, I actually found just your conversation with Andy more compelling than I found your actual pitch. I almost, when you were pitching to us, I felt like I was watching a character as opposed to you, the author. I could hear your voice, but also it felt very almost like a bit you were doing and maybe less like a pitch you were giving. But when you were talking to Andy about it, I had a bigger sense for what the book was as opposed to when you were giving us your formal pitch. So I don't want to say tone down your enthusiasm, but maybe merge some of your enthusiasm with this upfront, I was married to a therapist. I know what it's like to try to negotiate and bring people on the same side. And sometimes you're cranky. And this is inspired by my Yiddish heritage and how you can find peace and happiness while embracing your cranky side. So that when your bubby says, "Get your shoes off of my couch," you don't just fly off into a tailspin. There's, I think, a way to bring the humor with also bringing the Stephen who we just heard speaking to Andy right now.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Stephen.
Well, thank you.
Take care. Yeah, here we go. You have the floor, Marilyn.
Hi, I'm Marilyn Anderson, and I have another humor book, but this is a humor and relationship book, and it's called Never Kiss a Frog, A Girl's Guide to Creatures from the Dating Swamp. And it is a collection of funny dating stories, savvy advice, and comical illustrations that depict the men that women should avoid as frogs. Now, we've all heard the myths, kiss a frog and he'll turn into a prince, or you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. Well, this book proves that it isn't true. Women should never kiss frogs, and you can't find a prince if you're busy kissing frogs. So I have chapters like the long-term go-nowhere frog. We all know that one. Or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Toad, Croak and Dagger, Count Frogula, or Sir Frog-a-Lot. And now the advice tips are in the form of wart warnings or ribbit snippets, such as Count Frogula. The wart warning is, any guy who drains the life out of you sucks. Or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Toad, if he's got a split personality, you should be the one to split. And of course, there's the God Frogger. If he's a wise guy, be a wise girl. Forget about it. Yeah. Now, I know that this book would appeal to women from 18 to 80 the world over. And how I know is because in 2003, it was published by a small New York boutique publisher, and with a second printing in 2006. And I retained the foreign rights at that time, and I sold it to 9 different countries. Now, my US publisher mostly did the gift market. And at the beginning, they said they would do publicity, and they did nothing. So I did my own publicity, and in the first 3 months, I was on over 400 radio and TV shows. I was the dating, flirting, and kissing coach on ABC's Extreme Makeover, and I was in all kinds of print, including the National Examiner, college papers, and also I had a whole front page spread on the Sunday calendar section of the Toronto Sun, the Calgary Sun, and the Vancouver Sun. And unfortunately, my publisher didn't have books in Canada. So that was very disappointing. So at this point, I'm wanting to see if, even though it was published before, I just got the rights back. I've been trying for a long time in 2020. Now, my background is I've been writing for TV and film a long time. I wrote for Murphy Brown. I wrote for Fame. I was on staff of a show called Carolyn Company that starred Carol Burnett, Jeremy Piven, and Richard Kind. I've also written movies, a couple of movies, and I have a couple more coming out. I also have 3 other books out, and my latest one is How to Live Like a Millionaire When You're a Million Short. And I actually, talking about publicity, I just did the National Publicity Summit a couple months ago, where I met face-to-face with over 75 media outlets, including some big ones like Good Morning America, GMA3, Kelly and Ryan. So I have access now to a lot of big places, and I even talked about Never Kiss a Frog, but I really want to bring it out now. The thing is, with the pandemic, people are starting to date again. And so I think it's a great time for a new version to come out. So I want to know, will you leap into this project with me and get my frogs hopping again? We should tell women, never kiss a frog.
That's a good pitch. But the reason it's a good pitch is really not because of the book, but because of your platform. It was already out. I don't know how many copies it sold. Was it out from a major publisher? Do you know how many copies it sold?
It was with a small publisher, Red Rock Press. Like I said, they did mostly the gift book scene. And it sold probably about, in the US, maybe about 20,000 copies.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's impressive. And then it sold in 9 other languages.
Right.
But there are a couple of things I would not do. I wouldn't focus on that it's prescriptive, because you have no authority to be giving advice. They want people who, Dr. Phil, who gets on there, and they don't want you. They don't care about you. But you're a professional humor writer, and you've written for those kind of shows. So you want to push that it's a book of humor. You might think about, I think I've said this to everybody, if you owned a bookstore, what shelf would you put it on? And don't say 2 different shelves. And that's important. It sounds to me like a book of humor. And you can say that, well, yeah, you can say that you give tips of advice, but even that is part of the humor. But I mean, what's really, there are going to be some challenges, because publishers are skittish about publishing publishing books that have previously been published.
That's what I was concerned about.
Well,
yeah.
you want them to know that it's been out of print for a while, that it sold 20,000 copies. You can say the publisher didn't do anything, but frankly, I hear that with everybody, you know, and also, you know, if it gets published by, you know, major publisher, sometimes they don't do anything.
I know, and I am.
Yes. I would also hesitate to maybe throw your publisher under the bus, just because it might make some people a little bit hesitant to take you on, because it maybe shows a little bit of I mean, it's a small industry, and to hear you say they did nothing for it, they might not have done nothing for it, but at the same time, like, it's maybe not the reputation you want to lead with in terms of going out. I think what you did well in your pitch is you sold yourself. You said, I'm a hustler, I did this, I have these connections, I was able to, this is my background in film, this is my background in TV. I would lead with what you can bring to the table, and maybe take out what publishers did you wrong and say, I've recently got my rights back. It sold 20,000 copies, but there's still a market for it. The reality is you are going to have a really hard time selling this book again, because 20,000 copies is the market for it. 20,000 copies is what I would be very excited if we got it and sold 20,000 copies. So it's like, you're going to already look at publishers saying, is the market already saturated for this book? Are the people who are going to read it, have they already read it? So I honestly wonder if you're looking to kind of like get an agent, I would almost have felt this pitch would have been more effective of you selling you and what you want to do and what you want to do with an agent, and have this book be a secondary element of saying, I have a book, I'd like to see if we can get the rights back. I have the rights back too, if we can sell it again. I also have XYZ's up in the air.
I have an idea.
Yes.
Why don't you revise it significantly and try to sell it as something new? And you can just say, my last book was on a similar topic. It sold 20,000 copies and it was in 9 languages, but this one is different.
Well, I would, you know, the thing is, I do want to put the same thing in. I would update and revise it. And as a TV and film writer, I am now pitching it to TV and film as a series or a film. So I'm hoping that and it also has a ton of merchandising opportunities. At one time, I did have a big art licensing company who projected great things, but my lawyer, you know, we never came to an agreement, and they were bought out by another company. So, I mean, it has a lot of other things that haven't been explored yet in full.
Right.
So
the problem, I mean, this is, I think, the most important problem is that it was previously published.
Yeah.
But it was in 2003, so it doesn't matter.
It's a turnoff. It's a negative. Everything else you said was a positive. Selling yourself, all that kind of stuff. That's perfect.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, have you considered 2003 was so long ago? We're now dating on apps now, like we never have before. Why can't you have a Kiss a Lot of Frog, the dating app disasters or something like that, and focus on the frog who stands on a mountain and frog who's been to Bali 4 times. There are new tropes and different guys that I think you can explore to continue the series, and then you can pitch it as a package of Kiss a Lot of Frogs. I have new ideas, but also this backlist which has reverted. We can bundle them together and we can get 2 out, bang bang, and the publishers and agents want to know where they're going to build you, not where you've already been.
Yeah, because I was going to add that as other chapters, but you're saying instead of making it other chapters, make it a whole other book.
Yeah.
And sell it as a different book would be a lot easier, but that means you have to make it different. You have to work on it.
Okay. Well, thanks, Marilyn. We've got to move on, but thank you. Hey, Jennifer, you're up.
Hi. Hi, my name is Jennifer Ling Roof, and I'm here to pitch my memoir. Hi, and I'm getting a little sound echoing. So here's my pitch. My mother disappeared when I was. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We hear you. Yes. Okay.
My mother disappeared when I was 13 years old. Given that my parents were in the middle of a contentious divorce, my father immediately became the prime suspect. However, with no firm evidence, the police were powerless to remove me and my 3 sisters from his custody. How did I manage to live with the man who I believe killed my mother? My book will not only answer this question, but will detail the murder trial that took 17 years to unfold, one with no body, weapon, or eyewitness. My memoir, complete at 95,000 words, Normal is What You Know, will appeal to memoir fans as well as to readers of true crime and criminal justice. The narrative will also resonate with people who have experienced destructive family dynamics. The universal message is one of the importance of justice as well as forgiveness. I'm a freelance writer whose work has been published in newspapers and trade magazines. As a professional writer who is also a trained counselor for victims of domestic violence, I'm uniquely qualified to tell my story. I'm a member of the Independent Writers of Chicago, the National Association of Memoir Writers, and the NonFiction Authors Association. I share my interest in writing, reading, and the publishing industry with my 10,000 Twitter followers. And with a marketing degree from the University of Notre Dame and an MBA from Seton Hall University, I also have the business background and networks to help promote my book.
Yeah, I'd read it.
That's a good
That's
pitch.
a great pitch. Yeah.
I think you made all the point. Usually, like what I've seen mostly is that pitches are too long. I was kind of thinking your pitch was too short. I wanted to hear a little bit more about murder. And also you got the genre right. It's a memoir, obviously, but it's also a true crime book. It was a good pitch.
Yeah, I would definitely say it was a good pitch. I mean, you hit all the marks we're looking for. You gave us your background. You established that you are an expert in your field, but also you established that you have a personal point of view in a story that no one else can really tell, and that is unique to you. I think you nailed who your market audience is going to be. I think if you wanted to give a little bit more, this is going to sound callous, but if you wanted to give a little bit more grisly details in terms of your upbringing and how it played into the getting to the trial, I don't think that would necessarily go amiss. But I think in terms of being concise and giving us the information we need, if you were pitching to me, I'd say, yeah, send it to me. I want to see the whole thing.
Great.
All right. Well, you can't get better than that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. Take care. And now we have Shelley.
Hi, Shelley.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. I'm really excited. This is the first time I'm pitching it. I actually just finished writing and editing it on Wednesday. So.
Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Shelley Scandrani. I was born in Israel and I grew up in London and I live in Los Angeles. So I'm a mixture of 3 cultures. I'm 38 years old and I'm an actress, writer, poet, and filmmaker. I tell you all this because It All Began in Africa is the name of the book, and it is a self-reflective adventure memoir, which is set during an 8-day safari trip that I took with my mother to Tanzania, Africa last year. And then during the trip, I reevaluate all my life decisions so as to decide whether to move back to Israel and start a family before I'm too old to have kids, or to stay in America and continue pursuing my dreams no matter the consequence. The word count is 95,000. The writing style is fast and intense with a lot of associative thinking. There are some highly dramatic moments as well as some super, super humorous stories. I actually grew up in London with my dad without my mom, and my mom lived in Israel. So this trip is a really bonding and healing experience. And then during the 8 days, we have some really crazy moments, like we're stuck in a flash flood in the middle of the Serengeti at night, or I get bitten by an insect and I have to go to hospital. We have to like run from hyenas and hide behind a truck to pee in the middle of the wilderness, like really crazy things. And during that, I use those experiences to assess my childhood, my relationship with my parents, and analyze how these things affect a person's self-esteem as an adult. And relationships, huge backpacking trips around South America and India, where I was there for months, being an immigrant in the USA, the disillusionment of the Hollywood dream and the role of women throughout different cultures like Africa, Israel, Britain, and America. And I also pop in a few of my poems in there. And it's targeted at women mainly over the ages of 18. But I also think that men would be interested, because I think we're in a time where my generation of young adults, there's just so many changes that have happened that the kind of decisions that we made 20 years ago are no longer relevant, and we're all having to reassess where we are in our lives. And also, by the way, Andy, my book is both A Stranger Comes to Town and A Woman Goes on a Journey.
Oh, what can I say? There is a problem, though. And the problem is that travel, it sounded like, the first sentence, it was about when my mother and I went to Tanzania or something. Travel memoirs are really hard to sell, and they're very common. I see them a lot. You have everybody thinks they're going to be the next Paul Theroux, but it's a bummer. So I think the comp would be not Eat, Pray, Love, but something like Wild. That it's it's sort of that it takes what's it about? That's not it's an internal story, and I didn't get an idea of what that internal story was. It was this, but it was also that, and then you had to hide from hyenas. And I think you should try to figure out what is the story within the story that you want to tell. It's place-based. That's fine. But
can I answer?
Yes, you can answer, but I mean.
But I think the purpose to evaluate the pitch is maybe to show you the pitfalls in how you're projecting it. So if you know the answer isn't to tell us now, it's to incorporate the answer into your pitch.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that for me was where I had some issues. Is I think I need your pitch to be very upfront on the structure of the story, because it sounded at first like it was just going to be the 8 days of action in Tanzania, but then when you start talking about how it makes you reevaluate your childhood, your future, your life as an immigrant in America, it's suddenly, maybe by the middle of your pitch, clicked with me that this, in terms of the structural storytelling, wasn't a cohesive narrative 8 days in Africa. It was a non-narrative, multiple timeline story that involves you exploring your past experiences within the framework of a trip to Africa. So instead of saying it's an adventure-based memoir, I would pitch it as a memoir that looks at adulthood and what it means to be an adult within the context of a terrible but yet wonderful trip you had with your mother. That's, I think, where the pitch kind of went off rails for me. Is it wasn't very clear inside that pitch what your timeline was and what your structure was. And if you're going to have an interesting structure where you play around with present and past and jump around chronologically within a life to teach lessons, that is less action adventure memoir and more straight memoir within the framework of this trip as a catalyst.
That is amazing. Thank you, guys. I'm so grateful for your remarks.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Shelley.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. And now I think we have Margaret. Yes, Margaret. The floor is yours.
Okay, my name's Margaret Grunstein. I'm going to pitch, this is my second book. My first book, Naked in the Woods, was put out in 2015 by Oregon State University Press. It was a memoir. I am a psychotherapist as well, the owner-director of a preschool. From middle to end, A Coming of Aging is a 60,000-word memoir told in tales that follows the arc of my 70s. I enter the decade trailing the last filaments of my middle years and leave it pulled toward the immutable future. Early in the decade, a potential partner arouses erotic charges not dimmed by age. New bruises form when bumping against family, a timeless condition. Who am I now as I fade even further into old age, seen as almost genderless in the preening world of procreation? And committing to the present while planning for the end begets confusion, an unavoidable conundrum. Yes, at 70, every day is as vibrant, painful, joyous, and sometimes as tedious as it was as a teen, a young woman, a mother, and an empty nester. This I didn't anticipate. I thought, whenever I could face my fear, that 70 was exclusively defined by what had diminished, by what was less, by what had been and what I would lose. The surprise is that inside my less than juicy body resides a fecund mind and a fluttering heart, not in needed defibrillation, but beating with the powerful rhythms of life. The catch is that as I move through the decade, the present plays out in more relief against the end. a contradiction that is hard to grasp, let alone swallow. The market from middle to end is that fatted pig in the python of time, the baby boomer generation. The sheer size of my cohort and our strategic spot in history has meant that we have rewritten the book for every chapter of our collective being. We burst into our own in the 60s, hair, strictures, sexuality, and selves flying free, upturning everything around us by the sheer size of our numbers. As women, when it was time for us to birth our babies, we grabbed the handbook from the medicinal world and pulled it back to our bodies, ourselves. At work, we stepped out of our aprons and into the overalls of the trades and the pantsuits of corporations. Children grown, we dragged menopause out of the closet and into the light of day. Now we have a new frontier, old, a word laden with derision. But age does not condemn us to bleak vistas with palliative TV, passively waiting at the bus stop for the last ride to arrive. My synapses fire, ideas form, my inner world a rich landscape where I soar riding currents of creativity. Facing our impending end takes great fortitude, especially confusing, as we commit to the life force of the present. A fresh new 70 does, however, differ from a well-worn 78. Every decade has its own beginning, middle, and end, with each phase offering its own perspective. I entered my 70s more attached to my past, to the connection with younger times. Moving through the decade, I am pulled more to the future, one that brings me closer to death, but still vibrantly committed to negotiating life. I am alive until I am not, with the not, a dynamic part of the alive. My heart's still beating, my thoughts still thrumming. This, blessed be me, is a story I have come to tell. One of my 70s, a crossroads in the coming of aging, told by a woman, albeit older, who is most definitely of her time. From Middle to End is my second book.
Well, you know what I like is your references to being baby boomer. And one of the reasons I like it, since I'm also a baby boomer, is because, in the 60s, there was this kind of cult of youth we all had. And now, it's still there. We remember all that stuff, but the kind of disconnect between aging and the culture of youth, I think, is an interesting story. Okay, so I would kind of think about that a little harder. Some of your stuff, you kind of sounded too abstract, and I couldn't figure out exactly what you were talking about. That miserable fascist Ezra Pound said, "Go in fear of abstraction." And it's probably good advice for pitching as well.
I would say in terms of the pitch, it was nice that I think I know what your book is going to sound like. I have a good sense of your voice. I would say that if it was just a normal pitch event and we were sitting down and we have 5 minutes and you were telling me about your book, this would be very hard as a pitch because I don't think you actually talked about what your book is about. I felt like you were reading me the introduction to your book as opposed to just sitting down straightforward. Lizzie and Margaret were talking about what your book is, who the target audience is, who the publishers you'd like to look at, what your comps are. It felt almost as if I was at a reading of Margaret's introduction as opposed to a pitch, because most of these pitches will happen in crowded rooms. They'll happen with big tables of other editors and agents. There'll be a lot of things going on around you. If you're doing a virtual one, I will have a stopwatch going and there'll be an urgency there. And it's nice that you did let me know who you are and what your voice is, but at the same time, I wanted a little bit more practicality from you.
Very helpful. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Margaret. Well, can I just say, I can't resist but break in on that note and say, if you want a place where you don't have a crazy room of pitching and you want some time to really talk about your story, Roadmap Authors is a perfect place for you. I'm the director of the author division, and we're a lovely community where we have 3 levels. We have on-ramp for your basic dip in the pool, and when we have a pitching conference, which is all virtual, and you have 20 minutes each time to pitch to the person. and Lizzie actually signed someone right out of there. And then we have the top tier. So if you'd like to know more about it, please reach out to me. All you have to do is go on the Roadmap Authors website. You can either just punch Google authors into, punch Roadmap Authors into Google, or you can go on the roadmapwriters.com and hit the For Authors tab.
And I just wanted to pop back in and say bravo. Great job, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm so sorry, Ken, we kind of lost you in that, but Ken, your presence was like a specter, like a ghostly presence there. But yeah. And Lizzie and Andy, thank you. That was such great advice. Now, would each of you like to let people know where they can find out more information about you on your website, get any more details?
Just check out my website. It has contact information and some of my jokes.
And you can find me at the Seymour Agency website. I'm on Query Manager, as I said before. So if you're looking to pitch a commercial fiction project or a commercial nonfiction project, that's where I do all of my queries from. I've gone into the future. I'm not on email queries anymore. I'm on a platform. I feel so fancy.
Yes.
I remember when email queries were the future.
I know. Before we got paper queries, it's like people are like, "Should I mail in my manuscript to the agency?" I was like, "Please don't do that."
No. Stamped self-addressed envelope, please.
Yes, I remember those well. Well, I am saving a lot of money this way. Well, I want to thank Lizzie and Andy so much. You guys are wonderful. I have the opportunity to work with you a lot at Roadmap Authors, and I really appreciate both of you. You once again have given us amazing insights, and I never cease to learn from you guys. So thank you so much. Desiree, thank you so much for providing us this platform. It's just been lovely, and you are a delight. And I don't know what else to say, but thanks for everybody for coming and all your great questions. And I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions, but if you write to me at Roadmap Authors, I will do my darndest to answer all your questions.
My pleasure. And just letting everybody know, this is recorded. This will be on the Books That Make You YouTube channel. And if you like stuff like this, maybe we'll do something again. The next Book Fest is coming up this fall. So maybe we'll have some of you guys back and we'll do something similar, okay? And if people would like, you can sign up for email alerts so you know what we're doing on the Book Fest website. That's thebookfest.com. Thanks again, everybody. Everybody out there, great questions. Thank you, panelists. And thank you again, Roadmap Authors.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.